Okay, let's get started. I just want to double check. This is a place for the first session of the auditorium, first session on the Friday morning, and the last session track of the conference before the ending keynote. And there is No TTP by Dr. Martin Eian. If you're expecting that, this is the right place. If not, look for your right place to go. I am Shin Adachi, NTT Cert, and I'm going to be a session chair this morning at this auditorium, composed of two presentations. And let me give you a quick reminder. First, this presentation will be TLP white, and the Q&A, question and answers, will be the end of the session. And there are 2, 3, 4, I don't know. There are microphones there. So if you have any questions, just move into the right front of the microphone and wait for the instruction. Second, please fill out the session survey, session survey in the mobile app. After this presentation, your input is valuable. Third, turn off or silence your devices to respect presenter and, of course, the rest of the audience. Now, this is my great pleasure to introduce Dr. Martin Eian, today's presenter, who is a researcher at the Mnemonic. He has more than 20 years of work experience in IT security, IT operations, and information security research roles. In addition to his positions at Mnemonic, he is a member of the Europol EC3 Advisory Group on Internet Security. Please help me welcome Dr. Martin. The stage is yours.
Thank you. Do not try and detect the TTP. That's impossible. Instead, only try to realize the truth. There is no TTP. TTPs don't exist. They are abstractions, constructs that help us understand. You cannot detect a TTP. You can only detect things that exist. Furthermore, there is no such thing as a TTP. It's either a tactic, a technique, or a procedure. To make this useful, we need to be able to tell the difference. We need to understand what they are. And my opinion is that we currently don't. Know thyself. Originally from the Oracle of Delphi, popularized by the Oracle in the Matrix. To know yourself also means to know your limitations. To know what you don't know. If we think that we know, then we stop searching. We stop asking questions. We do not progress. The only true wisdom is in knowing you know nothing. This quote is attributed to Socrates, the ancient Greek philosopher. Socrates was a master of annoying people. He would start talking to an expert. He would ask the expert for definitions of key terms. And then he would keep asking questions until the expert contradicted himself, thus being annoyed. But Socrates' goal was to highlight what we don't know. And that is my goal today, to highlight what we don't know. And I'll start with a story about myself. I started as a junior threat analyst back in 2014. One of the first things that I noticed was people using the term TTPs. It seemed important, so I tried to understand what it was. I quickly figured out that it's an abbreviation for tactics, techniques, and procedures. But I didn't understand what each of those meant. So I started to annoy people. Whenever I heard someone say TTP, I would ask them, could you give me an example of a tactic, an example of a technique, and an example of a procedure? I never got any examples. Until a fellow threat analyst pointed me in the direction of Eian Stillians. Eian Stillians published 2 blog posts in 2014, one on the detection maturity level model and one on TTPs. What he did was basically to take David Bianco's pyramid of pain and then expand the TTP at the top into tactics, techniques, and procedures. And he argued that it's useful to view them separately. But in my opinion, the way Eian Stillians defined tactics, techniques, and procedures didn't make any sense. So I kept searching. Then, in 2018, the big breakthrough happened. I don't have any fancy sound or lighting effects, so I'm going to need your help. Try to imagine a choir of angels singing, a pillar of light descending from the heavens, and in the middle of that pillar, MITRE attack. Adversarial tactics, techniques, and common knowledge. This was exactly what I had been looking for. The knowledge base of my dreams, the framework that I would want to spend the rest of my life with. So I immediately started using it. But over time, I had this nagging feeling of missing pieces, of things not being quite right. And I saw attack being used in ways that didn't make any sense to me. And now I'm finally able to articulate why. But before I tell you why, I would like to ask you a couple of questions with a raise of hands. How many of you have used MITRE attack in any way? That's most of you. Thank you. How many of you have read the attack design and philosophy paper? 1. Okay. Good. But still fewer than those who use attack. If you use attack in any way, I strongly recommend that you read it. It's really good, and it clears up a lot of the misconceptions and misunderstandings about attack. Now, I went with the matrix as a theme, so we need a red pill and a blue pill. The blue pill represents my impression of what people in the security community think about attack, how they understand attack. This is based on discussions with customers, vendors, and peers, and a lot of reading. The red pill represents my understanding of how things really are. And this is based on my own experiences with attack the attack design and philosophy paper, discussions with peers, and also a lot of reading. So in short, the red pill is me and my understanding, and the blue pill is my understanding of others. So which one do we pick? Or why not do both? The structure of this talk is as follows. For each of tactics, techniques, and procedures, I will first present the blue pill, then I will present the red pill, and finally, I will tell a short story with some examples to illustrate. And now I'm going to test if the clicker works from over here. But let's start with tactics. MITRE attack enumerates tactics. Resource development, initial access, execution, persistence, privilege escalation, defense evasion, credential access. I couldn't put the rest of them in there because the font would be too small. But yeah, it's all there. This is a solved problem. Those are not tactics. They're tactical objectives and/or kill chain phases. Do we even know what a tactic is in the cybersecurity domain? We might never know because we think we know. But where do TTPs come from originally? The military. What are military tactics? Well, some examples of military offensive tactics include ambush, charge, skirmish, siege, encirclement. They describe something that you do, not the objective. But more importantly, they describe how you deploy your forces. Let's look at an example. Ambush is a military tactic. It describes reconnaissance to find suitable terrain. It describes preparation of the battlefield, traps and obstructions. It describes compositions of teams and roles, like rifle squads, machine gunners, anti-tank teams, security teams, assault elements. It describes deployment and positioning of those teams. It describes actions on objective. Once the enemy convoy enters the kill zone, you block off the front, you block off the back, you fire until you achieve the intended effect, and then you fall back to the rally point. Now, how does this translate to the cybersecurity domain? I don't know. But I see some parallels. Terrain and battlefield correspond to the attacker infrastructure and the infrastructure under attack in our world. The teams and roles have equivalence as well. One example, the team tasked with achieving initial access. If it's in-house with a threat actor, we call that the breach team. If it's outsourced, we call it an initial access broker. There are other roles as well. Malware developers, infrastructure maintainers, social engineers, money mules, and so forth and so on. A tactic is not a point event. It's a chain of events. Or a playbook. This playbook is related to the tactical objectives in MITRE attack. So we shouldn't throw those away. We should just stop calling them tactics. Maybe we can call them objectives. We do research on adversary roles and teams. We do research on adversary playbooks. but we lack a standard structured way to record and share this knowledge. Which brings me to my first story for today, with this nice little storytelling picture. I remember reading an incident report many years ago, but I can't for the life of me find that report again, which annoys me, but that's life. But I think it was about the 2013 Lockheed Martin breach. One thing really stood out to me in that report. The attackers were described as stealthy. They took great care to avoid detection and to cover their tracks. But once they realized that they had been detected, they switched to a smash and grab tactic. They tried to collect and exfiltrate as much information as they could, as quickly as possible, stealth be damned. Other examples include attackers that switch to destructive tactics or scorched earth if they realize that they have been detected, or attackers that suddenly drop ransomware when they understand that they have been detected. So first off, to me, these sound a lot like tactics: smash and grab, scorched earth. And second, wouldn't this information be useful to an incident responder? If you know that the attacker will cause destruction when they realize that they have been detected, would that affect your decision-making as an incident responder? Because it sure would affect mine. So wouldn't it be useful to collect and enumerate tactics like this in some kind of knowledge base? Like in MITRE ATT&CK? I think so, and I think we should do that. Moving on to techniques. Attack techniques describe how an adversary achieves something, how it's done, their behavior. Techniques are useful for attribution. We can detect techniques. Techniques can be used to make these nice heat maps of detection coverage. Actually, some of the techniques in attack describe what an adversary gets, not their behavior, but what they get, like valid accounts. My experience is that techniques are way too general to have any usefulness whatsoever in attribution. There's too much overlap. It doesn't work. And you don't detect a technique. You detect an implementation or a procedure. In fact, you don't even detect the procedure. You detect the traces that it leaves behind. I mentioned the design and philosophy paper, and about heat maps. This is a quote. The techniques within attack may have many procedures for how an adversary could implement them, and because adversaries are always changing, it's difficult to know what all these procedures are in advance. That makes discussing coverage of a technique tough, especially when some ways of detecting behavior rely on individual procedures, and some may span multiple procedures or even an entire technique. And furthermore, anyone mapping to attack should be able to explain the procedures they cover. Which brings me to my second show of hands. How many of you have seen technologies or products that map to MITRE ATT&CK? Come on, all of you have, right? And then the follow-up. How many of you have seen technologies or products mapping to attack that explain the procedures they cover? couple of you. Why is that so? Well, if you tell someone to do something, but you don't give them the means to do so, what's going to happen? They're not going to do it. Or probably not going to do it. And I think that's the problem. Attack doesn't really provide the means to map to procedures. So a short story about our use of attack. We made the mistake of trying to use attack for automation. And automation requires machine-readable information. A description field with human-readable text is the bane of automation, not just because it's difficult for a computer to interpret, but also because people will stuff all the important information into that human-readable description field, because it's easy. Instead of figuring out where in this big, complex structure you should put your information, you have this nice description field, you can put everything in there. But we did automation anyway. So we developed an open source tool called Adversary Emulation Planner. This tool takes a set of techniques and gives you a set of ordered attack stages with all the techniques that are possible to use at each stage. And to achieve this, we semantically model technique dependencies. Every technique requires something, and it provides something. This is the reason why you're using the technique, because of what it provides. And what it provides can be required by another technique and so on. So for every technique and sub-technique in attack, we describe what it requires and what it provides. And that made it easy to build a tool that generates the attack stages. This works when techniques describe how an adversary achieves something, their behavior. But it breaks down when techniques describe what an adversary achieves or what the technique provides. It doesn't fit, so we basically had to ignore those techniques. So if you come to attack with an automation-first mindset, chances are that you will be disappointed. Design decisions that work for manual processes do not work well for automation. Then over to the final part and my completely illegible slide. Sorry about that. Procedures. Attack describes the procedures used by adversaries. So the thing on the right that you probably can't read, that's from one of the techniques in attack, and it's a long list of procedure examples connected to threat actors or software. Have a look at the right-hand side here. This is the attack object model. Do you see procedures there? No. What you saw in the previous slide was procedure examples. Human-readable description fields. And most of them are of the form, adversary X uses software Y to achieve this. Procedures are useful for attribution. In my experience, you can observe two different adversaries using the same technique, but their procedures are different. By looking at the details, like command line parameters, you're able to distinguish them. You can't detect procedures either, but they contain a lot more detail than techniques. And those details are helpful when you develop detection analytics. So why are we not enumerating procedures? Why do techniques have IDs, but procedures don't? And this time, the story is about you. You handle an incident. During this incident, you observe a threat actor using Mimikatz for OS credential dumping. You see that this information is actually not in MITRE ATT&CK. And since you are an upstanding citizen, you want to report this to MITRE for inclusion in ATT&CK to help others. You now have two choices. You can either report that the adversary group uses OS credential dumping, or you can report that the adversary group uses mimikatz, but not both. The problem with the second approach is that this links the adversary group to mimikatz, but not to OS credential dumping. Mimikatz implements 9 different techniques in MITRE ATT&CK. So your observation was the use of a single technique, but someone else looking this up in ATT&CK have no way of telling whether the adversary used mimikatz for 1 technique or for 9 techniques. This is information loss, and information loss is bad. Why are there 2 different ways to report techniques or technique usage in ATT&CK? Well, I can give my opinion. Because procedures are not part of the object model. This has been a huge headache for us, working on threat intelligence automation. In my opinion, the correct way to record this information is as follows. The adversary group used mimikatz to execute a procedure. This procedure implements OS credential dumping, the technique. The adversary group and the software are linked to the procedure and not to the technique. Here's a picture of the road ahead. It's long. We can't see the end of it, but it seems to have a pretty clear direction. Now, the road ahead, also known as my personal wish list. I think that's maybe a more accurate description. This is what I would do. First off, I would remove all of these what-you-get techniques from ATT&CK. They actually hurt automation. If you cannot describe the behavior, how an adversary does something, then it shouldn't be called a technique. It's something else. And the second thing is, we should enumerate procedures and we should try to figure out how to represent them in a machine-readable way. And the same goes for tactics. We should start enumerating them. And we should stop calling the tactical objectives tactics, because that makes us think that we understand what tactics are. And even further ahead, if we are able to describe procedures in a machine-readable way, we should start looking at ways to transform this into detection analytics. And the closest I've seen there for a domain-specific language is STIX patterning, which could be a target for such a transformation. Now, in the introduction, I showed a quote from Socrates, the Greek philosopher, the master of annoying people. If you add a C to that, you get Socrates, the Innovation Project. A lot of the ideas presented here originated from or matured in the Socrates project. Socrates develops a security automation and decision support platform for security operations centers and incident response teams. So if you're interested in research on automation, have a look at the webpage. There's a lot of information there. But to wrap up, if you remember only one thing from this presentation, then you need to step up and do better, because I need you to remember 3 things. We don't know what tactics are. We don't know what procedures are. And we need to do something about that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Martin. Now it's time for questions. So again, there are two microphones I can see up front. So if you have any questions, just show up in front of the microphone. Yeah.
I'm Dilus. My question is what MITRE thinks about your personal wish list.
They've mostly ignored me so far. I think 3 or 4 years ago I tried pushing them to get procedures included in attack, but the answer was people are already complaining about how the complexity and too much information, so they didn't want to go there, but then 2 years later they implemented sub-techniques. So I don't know. I'll keep complaining. And if someone feels personally offended, then good. I think, I mean, someone has to ask questions. And I might be wrong. These are my personal opinions. I'm happy to be proven wrong.
Thank you for the good talks.
Thank you.
I'm in the cyber threat intelligence SIG. I would like to know how can we enumerate tactics and procedures where we don't know about them.
Yeah, we first need to agree on what they are. And as I said, the closest I've come is, to me, like things like smash and grab sounds a lot like a tactic to me. It sounds similar to what tactics are in the military domain.
How to enumerate it?
Well, you start identifying them. You read reports. You see descriptions of adversary tactics there. So I don't know if low and slow is a tactic. I don't know if, yeah.
Does it mean that we can reflect it into some numbering or some scales?
Oh yeah, to what enumerate means. It means assigning an identifier. Like in MITRE, for every technique you have a T and a number, an ID. Mm-hmm. That's what I mean by enumeration.
Okay.
And ideally, this would be part of attack itself.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Any more questions? Or are you still, it's too early in the morning? Is everybody waking up?
I woke up at least.
I know you're waking up. And you woke up very many people inspired, at least inspired me. Thank you very much. So if you have, again, any questions?
Oh, one more thing.
Oh, yeah, yes, please.
I'm going to just run off to the airport after the presentation,
Oh.
so you need to be good at rugby tackles if you want to stop me. But you have my, not anymore. The PDF will be published. My contact information is in there. Feel free to contact me.
Thank you. All right, so he's in rush. So let's help him. Thank you.
Thank you.
And have a safe trip back home. All right, we are now in the break, 10 minutes break, and we will start at 10:15 on time.